You're welcome back. As at 2020, Nigeria's rural population was at about 99 million. That's a 0.89% increase from 2019. World Bank collection of development indicators places about 48%. That's a population that should not be ignored if Nigeria wants to develop well. That's why we're focusing on that group this morning with Mr. Shuaib Idris. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Timeline Consult Limited. Good morning, Mr. Idris. Thank you for joining us in the studio.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
So this issue of rural-urban migration, it's a long-standing conversation. Is it a challenge in Nigeria?
Let me start by saying, yes, it is a challenge, but not peculiar to Nigeria.
Okay.
Rural-urban migration and rural development is an issue the world over, whether in Latin America, in Europe, in Asia, talk less of Africa. Even in the United States of America, there are policies targeted towards rural development. So it's not peculiar to Nigeria, and indeed is a challenge in Nigeria and a big challenge for us.
Okay, so it's a challenge because when the population moves to the urban, it places more demand and pressure on the infrastructure. So I guess the solution would be to develop the rural area so that we don't have, or how do you see that?
Well, let's first and foremost situate what do human beings like most. And then when we understand what human beings like most, then you can then see the reason why people move from one part of the globe to another. Fundamentally, mankind loves to have some basic necessities of life: water, electricity, good roads, job to do, hospitals, and what have you. Now, because resources are scarce, government is not able to provide these essential services across the length and breadth of, a country, for example, Nigeria. And when you provide this infrastructure in a few places, chances are, this infrastructure then becomes more like flower to a bee. The bee will just go wherever the flower is. So mankind will naturally drift towards where, such facilities are provided. You take our Lagos, for example. An average of 15 to 20 million people live in Lagos. Some of us came all the way from the far north to here for greener pasture. So these are evidences of the rural-urban migration, if you like.
So if I ask you, making it personal now, what can make you go back to your state of origin?
Well, for me, I may not necessarily be the best example, and I'm sorry to disappoint you that I'm not going to leave Lagos until the sea dries. So, yes. As a professional, one lives to come into the city, not just for greener pasture, but to get employment. As at the time some of us left our nooks and crannies, the headquarters of most financial institutions, and still till date are in Lagos. So we come for professional knowledge and, work so that you can get some livelihood. But the kind of rural-urban migration that has been a big challenge to Nigeria is the lower unskilled laborers or laborers that trunch into cities like Kaduna, Port Harcourt, Lagos, and the rest. If you look at what has been happening, most of these come in to the cities and they stretch the facilities of the cities, and they do not have the skills to be employed so that they could add value to the economy. So in essence, they become quote-unquote liabilities to the society. And the best way to possibly address this challenge is for government to go back to the basics by providing the necessary infrastructure that will enable these populace to remain in their, community and then be productive. Let us take, I would like to take us back to the memory lane. During President Babangida's time, we had DFRI, Directorate of Road, Food and Rural Infrastructure. It was a targeted rural development initiative. We had the People's Bank, which was also poverty alleviation directed intervention. We had the late Professor Olukoya Ransom Kuti, idea of primary health care in each ward. Those were what we call targeted rural development.
Well, how effective were they? I think that, and that'll also be an offshoot of that.
Well, you see, it is, the juries are out. Some feel they were not effective, some feel they are. But you see, to have a general answer how effective they are, I think it wouldn't be fair. I will say the Professor Olukoya Ransom Kuti's idea of primary health care, centers in the localities were largely successful. I mean, he's not alive, but we are here discussing him. May his soul be blessed, but it was largely successful. Even the Larukonyan DFRI, intervention, they were largely successful. I will give them like 60% success because roads were provided, laterite roads were provided. What we failed to do to stem the tide of the migration was to provide cottage industries that will help to retain the youth that are in those localities. Remember, in Nigeria, 70% of the populace are, employed by agriculture. Now, this is a country that lacks sufficient, road networks, and then storage facilities are not there. So if you don't have cottage industries in these localities, when they produce, what do they do?
Exactly. Because I was going to ask you that, I mean, the country, on the other hand, seems to be losing a lot with this migration because people who should be there to take care of things like agriculture, preservation, maybe if you had industries there, for preservation, storage, and we talk of the value chain in agricultural development. I mean, because it is close to the source, which is mostly the farm where you have the arable land for the agricultural production, and then if you had industries, cottages, like you mentioned, to take care of the preservation and at least begin the value chain, adding value to raw materials. Perhaps all these talks of FX not available for manufacturer and importation of everything, perhaps it would have reduced. This seems to be part of what the country is losing with this urban migration.
We are certainly losing. And I do agree with your thought that if we have cottage industries that are processing, the basic agricultural produce from the localities, number one, the rural-urban migration will significantly reduce. Number two, we will also provide employment, so the insecurity we are facing today will also significantly reduce. We are making some reasonable level of progress based on my little understanding of the situation in Nigeria. I can tell you, in the last 20 years, if you take a census of how many villages that were connected to the national grid, you will realize that there is some level of improvement. Number two, with the telephone that has come into being, the global system for mobile, that is the GSM, almost each nook and cranny is now being connected with telephone. And by that, we are able to do some financial services, POS are being provided. So there are, and there has been some marked improvement. However, as far as cottage industries are concerned, the 2 or 3 development banks that we have that are supposed to be helping in those directions do not appear to be doing as much as they should do. Bank of Industries, for example, Bank of Agriculture, Development Bank of Nigeria, Infrastructure Bank of Nigeria, these should be doing much more than what they are doing as far as targeted rural development initiatives, so that we can have improvement in storage facilities, improvement in the processing capacities of, the agricultural value chain, like you stated. Otherwise, we will continue to have this challenge.
Well, I guess that challenge remains because of issues like infrastructure. You mentioned road, you mentioned power. But we have the Rural Electrification Agency, and they've been talking a lot recently, sharing mini grids and alternative power to the rural areas. How effective?
Honestly, the National Rural Electrification Agency appears to be all talk, no much action. I have not seen much of their impact in the localities that I frequent. And mark you, I'm a frequent traveler in Nigeria, both the east and the west, the north, the south. I do travel a lot, mostly and largely by road, and you don't see so much of their impact. Yet, so much money is being, expended on. Maybe they should retreat and look at technology and say, how do I impact in the rural areas? Why don't we look at wind powered, initiative?
I think they're doing more of solar.
The solar, requires so much land, so much panel, and so much capital. So there are better ways that they can impact so much in these rural areas. And I bet you, without electricity, we are certainly doomed. If you look at the whole country like Nigeria, we are generating 5,000 megawatts of electricity.
Sometimes.
200 million.
Sometimes
220 million. 220 million. South Africa, with just about 50 million population, is generating close to about 55,000 megawatts. The quantum of what we lose, what we call post-harvest losses in agriculture, is unimaginable. Just imagine tomatoes. Those of us that live in Lagos, before they produce tomato in Kano or other parts of the country to bring it here, 40% of it is lost in the process of transportation. And that you and I have to pay, because by the time it comes here, the person who lost that 40% wouldn't want to lose the money, so he will first recover the loss and then make some gains. So we need to do a lot in terms of that.
When you said that, I remember a picture. I was doing a road from, I think, from Kaduna to Kano, and right on the road you could see tomatoes and pepper,
potatoes,
just down there, and then they're just going bad. Because I mean, these are smallholder farmers. They do not have anywhere to preserve it. There's no company that can do an offtake from them, to start the processing. So at the end of the day, some parts of the country is hungry, and in some parts of the country,
it's wasting money, wasting the food. Exactly. And if you even widen the discussion to even bananas, pineapple that the Cross River people produce.
Ginger, when I went to Southern Kaduna, ginger is one interesting product or crop that Nigeria seems not to be exploring in Southern Kaduna. They have a lot of it. If you just go behind somebody's house and then you see plantation of ginger.
I tell you, the Chinese are taking advantage of that. It's unfortunate to discuss, this, that we are in Nigeria and the Chinese are coming to take advantage. I'm happy that recently the government came up with a policy that foreigners should not be allowed to trade. But at a point, I know a Chinese that is trading in excess of 500 million naira worth of ginger per season. I mean, this is what we see every now and then. And unfortunately, again, the government sometimes appears to be helpless, or rather our policy makers appear to be bereft,
we have the policies.
Bereft of
we
ideas.
do have the policies. Doesn't seem that we are bereft of policies. It seems implementation is actually the problem.
I agree with you. It can be implementation. It can be also lack of the policies. To what extent are these policies appropriate, adequate, and timely issued? Sometimes the policies come in a little too late, sometimes they are inappropriate, and sometimes the implementation becomes an issue. Remember, every now and then we say the Nigerian factor. Otherwise, how do you explain that in the last 25 years, we cannot fathom how to address the issue of, say, tomato puree. We import tomato. How do you explain the fact that we have land that we produce cotton, yet we import cotton wood? How do you explain the fact that we produce firewood and we are importing toothpick? I mean, and
I hope we're not still importing toothpick, please. Don't make me cry.
So the challenges is not just the policy, whether they are there or not. I do agree implementation is an issue, but we also don't have monitoring and evaluation mechanism.
All right. Not a very pleasant picture there, but it's our reality for now.
Unfortunately.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Shoaib Idris, the Chief Executive Officer of Timeline Consult Limited. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.